In 2011, Apple sued Samsung for copying the iPhone, the same Samsung that was building critical parts of the iPhone. While lawyers argued in courtrooms across the world, Samsung factories kept shipping chips, memory, and screens into Apple's supply chain. Apple's operations chief would later describe Samsung as an important partner with a strong relationship on the supply side, even as the two companies tried to destroy each other in front of juries. So what was Samsung? Partner, enemy, or both at once? The relationship started years before the lawsuit, with a bet on flash memory. In 2005, Apple needed huge volumes of NAND flash for its next generation of iPods and for a phone that was still a secret. It needed a supplier big enough and financially stable enough to keep up. Samsung controlled roughly half the NAND market. Steve Jobs, according to people familiar with the talks, put it bluntly, "Whoever controls flash will control this space in consumer electronics." Apple signed the deal. The partnership deepened. Samsung sold Apple DRAM, displays, and then something more intimate. For the early years of the iPhone and iPad, Samsung was the foundry that manufactured Apple's application processors, the chips Apple designed and Samsung built. For a stretch, Samsung was effectively the sole foundry for those early A-series chips. That meant Samsung didn't just ship parts. It sat close to Apple's volumes and roadmaps. Analysts would later argue that kind of intimacy helped Samsung see where the industry was going. Apple had locked in a supplier it desperately needed. It had also invited a future rival into the machine. Then Samsung decided to become a phone company that mattered. Its Windows mobile handset, the Omnia, stumbled. Public reaction was harsh. So Samsung pivoted to Google's Android, the open platform that let manufacturers ship phones fast and fight Apple on price and selection. Outwardly, Samsung still sounded dismissive. In January 2010, Samsung President G.S. Choi called the iPhone's popularity excitement caused by some Apple fanatics. Privately, mobile chief J.K. Shin told staff something different. In an email later filed in U.S. court, the iPhone meant the time we have to change our methods has arrived. That year, Samsung launched the Galaxy S, side by side with an iPhone. The resemblance was hard to miss. The look, the feel, the whole posture of the product. Apple executives complained during visits in Cupertino. They expected Samsung to change course. Samsung didn't. For Steve Jobs, this wasn't just one supplier going rogue. It was Android, a platform he called a stolen product. He told his biographer he was willing to go thermonuclear war to destroy it. He said he would spend his last dying breath and every penny of Apple's $40 billion in the bank to stop it. In a cafe meeting with Google's Eric Schmidt, Jobs said he didn't want money. Even $5 billion wouldn't do it. He wanted the copying to stop. Apple had already begun suing other Android phone makers. Samsung was different, the highest volume threat, and still plugged into Apple's factories. When Samsung's Galaxy Tab arrived, Apple's leadership saw the next chapter. The tablet, ripped off the way the phone had been. Samsung was no longer just a parts vendor. It was the sharpest blade in the Android army. Inside Apple, the decision was not simple. According to people familiar with the discussions, Tim Cook, then the operations mind who kept Apple's factories fed, was wary of suing a critical supplier. Jobs pushed anyway. On April 15, 2011, Apple filed suit in Northern California. Galaxy phones and tablets, Apple said, slavishly copied the iPhone and iPad. Design, interface, even the packaging and trade dress. The copying, Apple argued, was blatant and wrong. Samsung countersued. The war went global. Roughly 10 countries, more than 50 lawsuits. Jobs would not live to see the end of it. He died that October, mid-war. And then the market delivered its own punchline. In the third quarter of 2011, while the legal fight was still young, Strategy Analytics counted the shipments. Samsung, 27.8 million smartphones. Apple, 17.1 million. Apple's Supplier had just become the world's #1 smartphone vendor by volume. Apple still made far more profit per phone. Samsung was winning the shelf. Apple had chosen principle and intellectual property over the safest supply chain path. The courtroom would decide who owned the ideas. The factories would keep running either way. In August 2012, a U.S. jury delivered the headline Apple wanted. Samsung had willfully infringed Apple's design and utility patents. The award, about $1.049 billion. The jury rejected Samsung's counterclaims in that trial. It looked like a knockout. It wasn't. Broad sales bans largely failed. Judge Lucy Koh noted that Samsung may have cut into Apple's customer base, but there was no suggestion it would wipe Apple out. Abroad, results split. In Britain, a court even forced Apple to say Samsung's tablets hadn't copied the iPad. Copying meant different things in different rooms. What Apple could change was dependence. Around 2014, Taiwan's TSMC began shipping Apple's processors, ending Samsung's exclusive foundry lock that stretched back to the first iPhone. The A9 chip was dual-sourced between Samsung and TSMC. After that, Apple's A-series foundry work went to TSMC alone. Apple was diversifying the brain of the iPhone without divorcing the rest of the body. But Apple never fully walked away. When the iPhone X arrived with an OLED screen, Samsung was still deep inside the product: display, memory, and more. Analyst estimates in 2017 put Samsung components at roughly $110 per iPhone X, and projected that Samsung's component revenue from the iPhone X could exceed what it earned from parts in its own Galaxy S8 by about $4 billion. The enemy's factories, on paper, stood to profit more from Apple's flagship than from Samsung's own. Years of appeals and remands ground on, more verdicts, more money. The legal war kept producing numbers. The structural irony kept producing purchase orders. On June 27, 2018, Apple and Samsung settled the remaining U.S. patent dispute. 7 years of fighting. The terms were never disclosed. Apple still said Samsung had blatantly copied its design. The factories still shipped displays and memory. The lawsuit ended. The frenemy didn't. You can win $1 billion verdict and still write the next purchase order to the same company. Apple fought for the right to own its ideas and still needed the other side's factories to ship them. In modern tech, partner and enemy isn't a temporary phase. Sometimes it's the business model.